Coming up next is Emeritus Professor Roy Green. Roy and I are going to have a chat about what it means to spread ourselves so thin that we rarely deliver the intended outcome as a nation, and whether Australia can accelerate the transformation of our economy to respond to the changes we're facing from established markets and emerging competitors by aligning our intentions nationally, coordinating our actions globally, and focusing our investments. We're going to begin with a short presentation by Roy before he and I sit down for a chat. Roy Green is a Special Innovation Advisor at the University of Technology, Sydney. He graduated with first-class honours from the University of Adelaide and gained a PhD in economics from the University of Cambridge, where he was also a research fellow. He's worked in universities, business and government in Australia and overseas, including as Dean of the Macquarie Graduate School of Management and Dean and Vice President for Research at the National University of Ireland in Galway. He's also a conjoint professor at the University of Newcastle and a fellow of the Irish Academy of Management and the Royal Society for the Encouragement of the Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. Roy has advised and published widely in the areas of innovation policy and management, as well as trends in business education. He's undertaken research projects with the OECD, the European Commission, and other international bodies. Roy has chaired the Australian Government's Innovative Regions Centre, the CSIRO Manufacturing Sector Advisory Council, the New South Wales Manufacturing Council, and the Queensland Competition Authority. He's also participated as a member of the Enterprise Connect Advisory Committee, the ABS Innovation Technical Reference Group, the South Australian Training and Skills Commission, the South Australian Public Sector Performance Commission, the Committee for Sydney Knowledge Economy Task Force, the Australian Fashion Chamber, and the Prime Minister's Manufacturing Task Force. I mention these things because it's important to understand the depth and the breadth of the work that Roy has done. And it is with this that I invite him today to make his remarks. Hello, Roy.
Yes, hi, Maria, and hello, everyone. Speaking to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, to whom we pay our respects. We've just been through and are still going through a global pandemic, and the perception is that we've done pretty well, or not too badly. Jobs and growth are back to where they were, almost. There's still a good degree of underemployment. We're still seeing major health and income inequalities in our society. But generally speaking, we seem to have come through, if not with flying colours, then at least with most of our economic tools intact. And so the question really is the program that the government has in place at the moment sufficient to address what are still the underlying issues that we face as a country? And these are largely structural ones. The pandemic brought forth a huge tidal wave of cash, government cash, which kept up aggregate demand, and it in fact fueled the jobs and growth we have, but it didn't address the underlying problems, and those still remain: productivity and wage stagnation, our outdated industrial structure, and a desperately slow energy transition. And the need to speed that up is now highlighted by the tragic events on the other side of the world. What we do know from the Harvard Atlas of Complexity, and this has been widely canvassed, is that Australia ranks very lowly, in fact, number 87 in the world in terms of the diversity and research intensity of its exports. This is a reflection of this outdated industrial and trade structure that we have. This results to some extent from the tariff reforms of the 1980s and 90s, although it needn't have done, because there was a bounce back by much of our manufacturing industry at that time. And it also obviously resulted from the commodity boom, which, because it boosted our national income due to high commodity prices, disguised the degree of structural deterioration of our productivity. And as a result, manufacturing, which is very important to the diversity of our exports, has fallen from about 30% of our economy in the 60s and 70s to 12% at the turn of the century, and now down to 6%, the lowest of the OECD, bar Luxembourg. And we have the lowest level of self-sufficiency of any economy. And this is something, this vulnerability is something that was brought home to us very starkly by the pandemic. Since the beginning of the century, our trade deficit in elaborately transformed manufacturers has blown out, doubled to 180 billion a year. And we now have the intergenerational report, which is telling us if we want to grow at any acceptable rate, especially growing our incomes, we have to increase our productivity to about 1.5% a year, and we're way off that number. We've seen other countries cope much better with commodity booms. The Dutch didn't do so well in the 60s and 70s with North Sea gas, and that led to the term the Dutch disease, when the currency value went up and their manufacturing exports became uncompetitive. But they reformed and recovered from that. The UK also was battered by its discovery of North Sea oil and gas, which of course provided a marvellous consumption boom, but did not result in investment in the underlying future strength of the economy. And it's only in the early 2000s that the economy began to rebalance back towards some areas of specialised manufacturing. The Norwegians, however, they had a resource rent tax, not at 20 or 40%, but 76%. And they've used this to create a huge sovereign wealth fund and the necessary pool of investment capital in the future of their research and innovation infrastructure. And the question is, are we doing that, and can we do it? The problem is that if research and innovation is the key to our future productivity, which I think it is, and it has been historically, technological change and innovation drives prosperity, we're not spending enough on it, and we're not spending it in the right places. Our expenditure on R&D as a proportion of GDP has dropped over the last 6 or 7 years from 2.2% to 1.79%, well below the OECD average of 2.4%, and well below the leader countries, Germany, Switzerland, Japan, Korea, and so on, who are up, nudging 5% of GDP. And we're simply not going to be competitive if we don't spend more on this very important area of our national economy. But it's not just about spending. In fact, this government has raised spending on research and innovation very commendably. It reached its depths after the Abbott government was boosted slightly by the Turnbull government, dropped again, and has now built up. And so, you know, between governments and between the various ministers we've certainly seen a lot of chopping and changing. And this is one of the problems that we face with our programs, that nothing ever seems to have much continuity. But more important than that, we see a great deal of fragmentation. One of the reports I was involved in a few years ago for the Australian government found that we had research and innovation spending spread across 13 portfolios of government, 150 different budget line items that didn't connect with each other. And this even leaves out the states because their role is critical in a vertical sense, as well as the fragmentation over the horizontally. So we've got about, we've moved from about 10 billion to 12 billion a year on research and innovation at the Commonwealth level, and it's spread across all of these portfolios. And we're seeing a lot of new programs emerging in that context. Again, very few of which connect with each other. We've got the modern manufacturing strategy, which we might come back to. We've got the Trailblazer program. We've now seen the 2 billion or so spending on the Australian Economic Accelerator program. We've got the digital economy strategy, some of which are run by different departments. There's been a big focus on research commercialisation, of course, because the perception is that we do quite well at research, but not at turning it into products. And so 2 different departments have 2 different sets of programs, far from being harmonised to address this. And we still don't have a sufficient attention to the kind of things that drive innovation in our economy, namely the growth of innovation ecosystems. We're in danger of not only losing a focus on basic science, on basic research in this rush to translation, which is no doubt important, but basic research is as well, because that's where it all starts. But we're also failing to see the role of innovation ecosystems as other countries do. Research commercialisation isn't just a linear process from lab to market. It's a process with multiple entry and exit points. It must involve universities. Clearly, CSIRO has a role. Foreign direct investment companies, especially research-intensive ones, SME supply chains, and other countries do put these together in the form, for example, in the UK, of catapult centres, in the US, Manufacturing USA institutes, in Germany, Fraunhofer institutes, and they're coordinated. They have coordination mechanisms like Innovate UK or Vinnova in Sweden. These are mechanisms that we don't seem to be able to develop very successfully here. We're very good at grant programs. That's what we do, although maybe we're not so good at the moment, because in the modern manufacturing strategy, we've spent only 85 million apparently out of over $1 billion that has been allocated to that program. So we're not very good at getting the money out the door either, but more importantly, are we very good at creating those place-based innovation ecosystems around specialised areas of knowledge and capability that can drive areas of current and future competitive advantage. And that's really where the picking winners issue comes in. I saw Larry Marshall said yesterday it's better than picking losers. It certainly is, but it doesn't mean necessarily picking companies. It means picking sectors and technologies in which we're likely to have competitive advantage. And we're certainly not going to have competitive advantage in everything. We only do 2% of the world's R&D. So we've got to choose very carefully. And we've seen in other countries that if you choose carefully, you can get some pretty substantial winners. Look at the investment in Tesla by the US government, for example, or in the iPhone previous to that. So just in conclusion, what makes up a successful national innovation system? We need a foresight exercise to know where we're going. As Larry put it, what lanes we want to swim in, and that should be a regular exercise with both qualitative and quantitative component. Other countries do it. We can do it too. We need a coordination mechanism within government, both across departments, but also between the Commonwealth and the states, something that's eluded us for decades. And as states are playing a much bigger part in research and innovation, they need to be drawn in, and we need to make sure that we have what the European Union would call additionality and subsidiarity to ensure efficiency of spending, because it's not, as I said, just about the amount, it's about the effectiveness with which we spend. And we need these ecosystems. We need these industry-led collaborative research hubs like the catapult centres. Could have been done with the modern manufacturing initiative, but we switched it instead to grant programs. I don't think we'll get as much bang for the buck as from those as we would have if we'd thought more institutionally and long term. And of course, we need a skill base, and we'll hear more about that this afternoon, I'm sure. But building up the skills and capabilities, especially at a time when we have low skilled immigration, which I'm sure will build up in the future, but we also need the domestic skill base as well, through our universities, through our TAFEs, and in particular with the integration of universities and vocational education. And finally, we just need a lot more emphasis on placemaking, spreading out across Australia the areas of specialisation that are going to contribute to our future competitive advantages. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks so much, Roy. There's a lot in that. Over the last, I think it's been 10 years now, when I started in this area, in the office of Senator Sinodinos at the time. And I guess what's really fascinating is that the coordination is the key to all of this. We have the answers, we know what the pillars are, the reports have been written, the money's been allocated, but the one thing that seems to challenge us is the coordination, although we're starting to see that in the States. So, for instance, what's happening in South Australia around both precincts and programs. So this morning we heard from David Pisoni about the way that they're reshaping their education program so that young people get to do work experience in the lead up to then decide what subjects to choose at school. And having done that, you know, it reveals their career. What is it? You've been in this space for decades. What is it about or when was the last time we got it right? When was the last time we rallied behind a vision and put our shoulders to the wheel as a nation to deliver it? Because I appreciate it's a lot of small tasks happening all over the place, but it seems to me that we're almost at odds with each other. We're constantly competing with each other. When was the time? Where is an example of where we got it right?
Yes, well, I think a lot of the states have been getting it right lately. States are taking a much stronger interest in this. But in terms of our national commitment, well, we clearly got it right after the Second World War. We had a nation-building program. We understood where we wanted to be, where we wanted to go. A lot of that was protected by high tariff walls, which became unviable. So I guess the next reform program that was successful was the reduction of those tariffs and the stimulation of areas that would replace the traditional industries that might no longer be competitive. That went quite well in the late 1990s, even the early 2000s, until the commodity boom. And it's not since then that we've had really a single vision of where we want to be. We've had, I've lost count of how many industry ministers, not just since this government came to office, but previously as well, considerable turnover. And we've had some very good ministers. I won't name the ones that are my favourites, but we've certainly had some good ones, but it's been a mixed record. And no matter how good you are as a minister, if there's no continuity and the next minister wants to either take credit for something you're doing or disband it altogether or shift it into a different track, then you're not likely to get the outcomes that you originally desired. So many programs that were well-intentioned end up being very confusing. They fall apart, they become discredited. One example I guess I could pick out of the air would be the industry growth centres, set up, in fact, with a view to some modelling on the UK catapult centres, but with maybe a 20th of the funding. I think they were set up with about $180 million. The catapult centres had a long-term focus of about $3 billion, a lot more than 20 times, I guess. And the growth centres were told they had to be self-sustaining within several years. Well, that's just not possible. If it's a public good exercise, it's going to require ongoing public funding. But that public funding then generates a multiple of itself in terms of future co-investment by private industry. And we've seen that with the most successful cooperative research centres. And these must always be part of our picture as a very successful initiative. The CRCs, especially one I'm involved with Melbourne, the Innovative Manufacturing CRC has generated around 300 million of private investment. The Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Hub up in Queensland is doing something similar, and doing it not within a university, outside a university, in its own facility, but connected with 8 or 9 universities. And that's the way Catapults, Manufacturing USA Institutes, Fraunhofers, and so on actually run. They're place-based. They take an interest in specific areas of manufacturing or data science or digital, and then they run with that and they create globally competitive companies that can compete in global markets and value chains. And since the whole transition around the world and in Australia from large vertically integrated companies to smaller, more specialised, more flexible companies as part of global supply chains, that's really the direction in which we have to go. And collaborative research hubs become the glue and the areas in which industry, universities, research institutions co-create our future.
So the role of business in all of this, clearly there have been great examples where businesses embraced the research and development. You know, the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre tells fabulous stories where business has gone into university, collaborated, taken the research out, created new products and grown markets. And large businesses have done the same thing. And yet I'm not sure that we've got enough of businesses' attention focused on transforming themselves quickly enough, introducing new, more competitive offerings to a global market. Has business pulled its weight?
What all the data shows, and certainly the OECD data shows across all developed nations, and this is part of the struggle to understand declining productivity growth as well, is that we're seeing a kind of bifurcation of leaders and laggards. We have leader firms in every country which are ahead of the productivity curve, which are doing the R&D, but they're doing a huge amount more than the laggards, if the laggards are doing anything at all. And the issue is, how long is the tail? Because if you've got sufficient critical mass around the leaders, you pull the tail with you. The problem in Australia is that we do have leaders. We have some wonderful companies in med tech and precision engineering and so on. Many of them are household names. Many of them are not, actually. They're just part of global supply chains, but they're the best at what they do in the world. And yet we have so many that are just not interested in moving up to that level. And the challenge is, how do you get those laggard firms to transform themselves? And that's really where the connection with local innovation ecosystems, local innovation precincts becomes absolutely critical, because you can have a top-down program, you can give out grants, but it's the personal interaction, the building up of networks, the creation of complementary supply chains that will add to that sense of transformation. It's not a solo run, it's something that companies do together. And we see that in the industry clusters in Germany, around the Mittelstand, in Cambridge, UK, obviously Silicon Valley being the exemplar, Massachusetts with its amazing biotech and biosciences companies. And Massachusetts is an interesting case, really, because that was a place which was on the decline 30 or 40 years ago. It was seen as part of the US Rust Belt, deindustrialized, going nowhere. But it reinvented itself, and it did so around its leading universities. And clearly now the attention to research and innovation in that context has been the source of its transformation.
So Kathy Foley, the chief scientist, has identified 3 outcomes on which she'd like to deliver during her term. If you were the nation's chief entrepreneur or running industry and innovation for Australia, what 3 things would be on your list?
Yeah, well, as outcomes, I think the first would have to be creating a more diverse and innovative and resilient economy for the longer term. To think long term, not what kind of grant program can we do over the next year to keep the industry department busy, but what kind of institutional arrangements can we put in place that will transform our economy and bring it to the forefront of global research and innovation, number one. Number two, I think on everyone's mind is how do we manage the energy transition? And the energy transition is not just hopping out of fossil fuels and then exporting something else. It's about using our access to cheap, clean energy to rebuild some of the industries that we've lost and to rebuild them in different ways, especially manufacturing. Because if we have sources of cheap energy in Australia, for example, with battery manufacturing as well, using our own lithium, processing it here, we have the whole value chain. We can become not just a renewable energy superpower, we can become a superpower in specialized areas of manufacturing that we can export into global markets. Thirdly, innovation isn't just about transforming our economy, it's also making us a more inclusive society. And with International Women's Day yesterday, we're reminded of the fact that half the population still has immense barriers to their participation in the economy. We're losing huge talent, girls who graduate from high school and universities ahead of their peers. Where do they end up in their careers? Long way behind their male counterparts. And that's something no society can tolerate. So those are my 3.
They're 3 fabulous ones. And the only other one I would add to your 3 would be competition. And I think I was listening to the President of the United States deliver the State of the Union, and he had a line in there that said, "I'm a capitalist, but capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, and it drives up prices." And I think that's something that holds true. I mean, in a market our size, competition has to be the game, right?
Absolutely. And competition is now being seen as critical to the future of innovation, so that global tech giants don't just swallow other companies and suppress their ideas, but with competition, we enable those small to medium companies to become large ones as well.
Roy, I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and thank you so much for the introduction. This afternoon we have, or coming up next, we've got Peter Verwer who'll be talking to us about the Global Talent and Global Business Program. And then that's followed by a fabulous session on strategic procurement, because of course that's the missing bit. All and fine to have something on offer, but someone's got to buy it. So how can you turn the procurement asset into a value driver? Thank you again. I look forward to catching up in person very soon. A pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria and Roy. Now we've attracted here in Australia some of the world's leading minds and leading businesses, many of which you've already heard from today. They've come here to grow their businesses, commercialize their research, and develop their careers. So why do entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinkers choose Australia, and what's keeping them here? To answer that question, I'm introducing our next guest, Peter Verwer, who is a respected and experienced business leader with extensive international, commercial, academic, and cultural networks. His previous roles include executive chairman of startup think tank Fractal IQ, CEO of the Asia Pacific Real Estate Association, CEO of the Property Council of Australia, and adjunct senior research fellow at the National University of Singapore. He's been leading the Prime Minister's Special Task Force on attracting talent to Australia, and prior to his appointment at the task force, he worked with government and industry across Asia to help open up capital markets platforms. Peter was invested as an Officer of the Order of Australia in January 2019 for his distinguished service to the property sector, sustainable development and construction, as well as professional bodies. And it's my pleasure to introduce Peter, who's appearing virtually.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Maybe I could just get some cue that you can hear me clearly.
Absolutely.
Okay. And thank you, Maria, for the invite. A lot of the speakers today have been answering this question, which is, how do we supercharge Australia's growth and prosperity based on a plan and learning lessons of this COVID period? And I'm going to talk a bit about that in terms of the job that's been given to this Global Business and Talent Attraction Task Force to do these things. One, harvest the world for its brightest minds. Secondly, do the same thing for pioneering companies that are going to ensure Australia can be at the forefront of sciences and technologies. Address policy blockages that occur, and then finally, tell the world about the opportunities that exist in Australia. Now, I'm going to do that thinking about the 5 superchargers and accelerators, which we think are going to get there. And I think that they touch upon some of the, a lot of the issues today. I'll give you a way more optimistic than the speakers that I've heard so far. But I don't disagree with them. It's just that there is a strategic approach that we can take, which gives us grounds for great confidence. One of the things I do is I speak to companies in Silicon Valley or the UK in health and life sciences, anywhere in the world that are the leaders, but also to the individuals, the brightest minds on the planet that we want to attract here because we want to be a magnet for talent and capital. And they have a similar outlook about what it is they're looking for. And it's these things. If you are a world leading or an individual, an exceptional individual, you're looking for a country that knows where it wants to go, that has policy blueprints. The touchstone here, Singapore, where I lived so long, the Silicon Valley of public policy making, it has 23 industry transformation programs. They are long-term, they are integrated. They have policy signals which are sent to academics and researchers and the marketplace and individuals. They're the gold standard. Israel, the Netherlands, Ireland, Nordic countries, Canada, to some extent, all do as well. Do we? That's the question. My answer is yes, by the way. And a judgment's being made about these things by the people that we're inviting into the country. We're not picking winners. We're inviting winners to this country. And they don't come here unless they see a country with a plan. Secondly, they want to see a country that has foundations. We've just heard that we scored very lowly, low down the ranking in terms of several matters. But what about celebrating those areas where Australia actually is a world leader and raising visibility about this tremendous success that we've had, not just as theorists and conceptualizers, but as inventors and commercializers as well? Yes, all of them are important. The third thing that they look for, and that good institutional arrangements and a public policy framework for a country, especially a Commonwealth, needs, is to be sending the right signals about incentives and tax and regulation and community responsibility and ESG and all that sort of stuff. And the question is, does Australia do that? Have we got our act together? My answer is going to be, it looks, a qualified yes. And the fourth thing we've just heard is that, all of this is wrapped up, if we really have our act together, by nurturing ecosystems which are self-sustaining, they're re-energizing, they're dynamic, constantly evolving and the government's policy is to champion a fourth industrial revolution. A fourth industrial revolution, an Industry 4.0, that is codified in these policy blueprints, that builds on the successes and the foundations that we have as a nation. They're sending a new set of signals, but this time driven by a digital backbone and powered by clean energy. Right? That's the biggest goal. That's the simplest way that I can summarize it. And then the fifth element of this menu, this cookbook of how to build prosperity, social cohesion, productivity, greater competitiveness, is to activate the talent that exists. Even though my job with my colleagues is to bring in the world's best people and firms, the reason for that is to unlock our homegrown talent, to give them not just jobs, but better jobs for the future, but also to keep the best of our alumni, to give, for those expatriates, the 600,000 that returned during the COVID period, to give them a choice that before they felt that they needed to leave, if people need to leave, then they should leave, but they should know that they've got a choice. We wanted to reverse the brain drain into a brain gain, but it's actually that brain bridge and the brain circulation, which is the holy grail there. And that's why we've been bringing global talent to achieve those goals. So, oh my God, there's my ticker thing. Maybe we could move the slide forward. I've just disconnected myself there. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's look at number one here. The policy, does Australia have policy priorities and blueprints? If we could move ahead a slide, please. How would industry policy be different? We've just heard from the professor that, yeah, we had this great period of microeconomic reform, which set us up for nearly 30 years of growth. You wouldn't do the same thing again, but because you can't repeat those policies. You lower the tariff barriers once. So what would the goals be this time? Well, I think that what the government has said very clearly is that now capacity, making sure that there's an interoperability between achieving our national security goals and technological innovation, building supply chains, building resilience, and helping deliver these signature policies, which I'm going to show you in a second, is the goal. But we need to inject talent to unlock the local talent, bring in international talent, global talent, and the pioneering firms to do so. So one of the questions that people have is, okay, Peter, so if we're going to have these long-term policy blueprints for Australia, and as we've just heard in the past, there's been chopping and changing and they're not coordinated and they don't elegantly link up with each other. Have we used this COVID period to actually address some of the deficiencies that we've been hearing today? So what you have in front of you at the moment is the current map of Australia's public policy blueprints. And they touch the key areas where we want to move forward as a nation. And I'm just going to, we'll circulate this because this is an exercise that hasn't been undertaken in the past. And as you can see there, in terms of the first area, the knowledge and technology infrastructure, which is so important, like investing in innovation, investing in R&D, cherishing the commercial and theoretical part of science and technology, but more seamlessly integrating that into commercialization. There is no shortage of blueprints and policies. The problem is not that we have no ambition in this area. The issue is more likely, as we've just heard, what about the integration? Are they as neat and elegant as, say, the Singaporean policies? But I would put it to you that they are. But they weren't designed to be cohesive, but they can be re-engineered to be cohesive. And we've heard about the modern manufacturing and supply chains, which is at the core of this huge ambition to have a new microeconomic reform program for Australia. And I'm just flicking through these other ones. There's a bit of a delay, guys, so if you could just move forward one slide forward, as well. So all of these, just one more would be helpful. So what you have in front of you is a set of priority areas which have been developed by analysing all of Australia's, auditing all of Australia's weaknesses during the COVID period. Well, let's just say the weaknesses which have been revealed during the COVID period. And there are a range of areas here which become the focus for the government's blueprints and sending signals and incentive programs. But it's not the sectors that are important here. It's the sciences and technologies that are in the middle of this diagram, which are creating new industries and reshaping Australia's core industries. And so the real issue then is, if we've got plans which are long-term and which are coherent, but maybe need a little bit of work in terms of integrating them, are we sending the right signals to the marketplace? Or are we just relying on old-fashioned approaches like grant programs? So one of the things that we looked at recently is, okay, so what's Australia's real tax rate? Not the headline tax rate, that's irrelevant. It's the effective tax rate. And also, what is the value of all of the grants and incentive programs in Australia? And here's the answer. The effective tax rate for Australia is just a touch over 20%. Right? That's the median tax rate. This work was done by Accenture. And we also had them add up all of the grants and incentives programs. And we've heard a very clear view with the previous speaker that, you know, maybe that's not the way to go. But the issue here is there's no shortage of money. $70 billion, it's more than this now. That's the value of the bucket. 3/4 of that is federal, a quarter of it is the states and territories, and the states and territories are starting to top up more. There's never been as much an appetite for the states and territories to get in there and try and encourage innovation. I mean, it's huge. But there's the problem. You can see it's spread across 1,706 different programs. The final thing I'll say on these signals, let's look at these looking on any financial engineering. So, sorry, agriculture about 6.7%. There we go, thank you. If it's energy and renewables, you're paying less than 10% tax. Health and life sciences about 6.3%. So a low effective tax rate is as good as grant programs, but on top of that, there are R&D allowances, there are venture capital allowances, and a range of other measures. Now, maybe the complexity is a problem there, but the starting point is still quite a comprehensive set of programs which are specifically designed to achieve many of the objectives that we've been talking about today. So this slide, I'm just going to ask the tech people just to forward through all of these things. I was speaking to a bunch of Latin American firms this morning, and in a non-boastful way, we wanted to highlight, you know, where is Australia number one? As assessed by independent organizations, the OECD, World Health Organization, Boston Consulting Group, the Economist Intelligence Unit, and all of the rest of it. This is a subset, a small subset of all of the areas where we're number one in the world. We've now looked at all of the areas where we're number 2 or 3 or 4 as well. And we have about 140 of these indicators. And how many countries have as many universities in the top 100 as we do? There's only 3 others, and one of them is tied with us, and that's China. Only the US and the UK have more. So is this a Panglossian presentation saying we've got no problems? Absolutely not. What I'm trying to say is that there are so many positives, and there's such an appetite from governments and from industry and from universities that we're not starting from zero. All we need to do now is to move is to better cohere and coordinate these efforts. I'll finish off because I'm about to go over. Oh, I've got 3 minutes. Nurturing ecosystems was one of the 5 big things that we were looking at. So I wanted to have this ready for you today, which is our mapping of the ecosystems of Australia, done in league with universities. And we used to boast that Australia had more than 100 science and tech hubs. That was in our literature for the Global Business and Talent Attraction Task Force, and with Austrade and with the Department of Industry and whatever. Well, like the work we've done on tax and like the work we've done on incentives, we went and counted it up properly. And the problem is, I can't get the 4,000 ecosystems onto a nice, neat map. Even when we break them down to large ecosystems and hubs, it's hard to get them on the map. But we've solved it, and we'll soon have a fantastic interactive map of all of Australia's science and technology ecosystems. Why have we done that? Because our job as the Global Business and Talent Attraction Task Force is to say to the world, is to answer the why Australia question to the world. And one of the first questions any firm and any individual is, Peter, will I be able to be at the frontiers of science and technology? And can I immediately connect with ecosystems and like-minded people and people who are being innovative and people who are being experimental and have the choice of commercialization or not, have the choice of working with business or not-for-profits. And that's going to be summarized in this map, of which there's no shortage. So finally, in terms of harvesting talent, I do encourage everybody to go to the globalaustralia.gov.au website, because it is specifically designed in terms of technologies and sciences and sectors to make the case for Australia. It's not to say that we're the best in the world in everything, but it's to say that we have ambitions to do so, to be at the frontiers. And the thinking about a 4th industrial revolution, which this time is digital and powered by clean energy, and that we're bringing in firms already who say, yes, I want to be part of that. So huge number of green hydrogen firms. The world's biggest solar delivery firm, Sun Cable, where the cables will be made in Australia, not in Europe. This is the website that makes that case. And if you don't think the case is being made well enough, I implore you, please contact us, because we want to make it stronger. But of course, it has to be factual. You know, it has to be true to label. And that's the story with this website. And there's a recent arrivals section, which I'll come to in 1 second. But what we do is we see talent as a form of capital, and visas are apps. And during this COVID period, we created a visa called a Global Talent Visa, which provides permanent residence for a talented individual and their family, including the kids. And during this COVID period, nearly 18,000 of these global talent visas have been issued. So these we reject 56% of people, 5-6% of people are rejected. They can use other visa categories, but this global talent visa is for people who are at the forefront. Now, I know that universities support this, because universities are the biggest users of this global talent visa system. 18,000 of them issued. And the beauty, apart from permanent residence, is that they're processed very quickly, sometimes in a weeks. We have other visa products to bring in the leadership firm very quickly. So my final remarks really are what we're doing next. Women in, sorry, if we could go back one, please. Just go back one, please. That would be very helpful. Women in STEM, we have a huge program working with partners. Women in STEM in Asia is very popular. It's one of the biggest attractors to our website, and we're totally committed to it to make sure that, gender balance is just the guiding principle for everything that we do. Check out our website. you will see that writ large in everything that we've done. Go to the recent arrivals section. They're all half of them are women. Sorry, we just have to go back to that previous slide. Connecting people to hubs our alumni to hubs. We've created alumni groups. We want to connect them into your universities and to your firms, and we love to work with you on that. We're developing AI hunting engines for talent. It's not easy to find post-quantum cryptographers. Hunting engines are a way of doing that. And then finally, how do we know that we're going for the right firms and the right people and sending the right message to the rest of the world? By working with people such as yourselves. Lots of universities, lots of private sector, lots of not-for-profits, all the professional societies, all the business groups. If I haven't spoken to you yet, please just contact me, because we also need your help to tell this strong story to the world. Australia.gov.au, but also to check out the recent arrivals section, where probably we're up to about 120 people now have given us permission to put their story on our website, the brightest minds from around the planet that any other country would love to have. So let's hear about a minute and a half of what they have to say. Thank you.
What was fantastic about the visa program is we moved here for my husband's job. He got a job first working in the aerospace industry. That's fantastic. But I'm a wife, I'm a mother, but I'm also a professional aerospace engineer who sends spacecraft to Mars. And so I didn't really want to give that up. And the Global Talent Visa program allows me to still pursue my own professional career here.
The visa process was very smooth and easy for me. I got my expression of interest approved within a couple of weeks, and then it took another couple of weeks to get the visa.
Australia even gave me the confidence to start my own business, which is a great, exciting new step in my career.
South Australia offers a lot of different opportunities for film. My family and I were looking for a country that was English speaking and that could take my daughter's education further and also my visual effects career.
Career-wise, I'm very happy that I made the move. I think I significantly grew my career and my experience. So not just in cyber, but in all other aspects.
Australia is one of the key markets for renewables today. The environment is very supportive for these startups to expand potentially overseas or to grow the country.
I think that lifestyle, that quality of life, that balance that you can build here is something that I wouldn't change.
Thank you very much, Peter. We do apologise for the issues with Peter's line there, but I trust it didn't abrogate his message, which is such an important one, and one that I think it's an obligation on all of us in the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem to be repeating, which is that Australia is such an attractive place to do business. Our space speakers this morning, Jill Soibitz and Joe O'Brien, were both Global Talent Visa recipients. We've hired Global Talent Visa recipients at Flair, and it's a terrific opportunity. I also think that the message that Peter had about the tax system is a really important one. I've often said that Australia has the most attractive tax system in the world for setting up a new business as an entrepreneur. When you think about the effective tax rates, plus all of the R&D tax incentives you get back on top of it, carry forward offsets, etc. So it's such an important message, and we're definitely indebted to you as a nation, Peter, for the work that you've done.